And we're good. So we're recording to the cloud today.
Okay, so I know we've been taking a few minutes to jot down our thoughts. So at this point, I'm going to ask in the chat if we can, you can post your thoughts in the chat. I'm going to actually take us through that first question. Would anybody like to share, take out their muted mic and share the first question? What was your experience like working with a group of people? Was it challenging? Was it easy to work with a group of people that have different thoughts, different journeys, different learnings in life and what they bring to the table? Would anybody like to unmute themselves and share, or put it in the chat? We will take both.
And Marisa, can you go back a slide to the conocimiento slide?
Yeah, it won't let me right now. For some reason, I need to actually go here like this. It wouldn't let me just go back. So was it easy to work in that group when you work? So I'll keep an eye on the chat. Or would anybody like to share? Don't be shy.
Mm-hmm.
You can put it in the chat. Oh, yes, Gris, thank you. Gracias, Gris. Oh, and I think Gris, hold on a second. She is in the Spanish session, in the Spanish room.
Ahí estoy.
Sí, gracias, Gris.
Ok. Si fui parte de algún grupo, bueno, realmente he sido parte de varios, pero quizá el que más me ha llegado son grupos de superación personal. La pregunta de si fue fácil, no, realmente no lo fue. Fue bastante difícil porque enfrentas tus miedos, enfrentas a veces las críticas, el tiempo sobre todo que se supone dejas cuando realmente es al revés, ¿no? Lo estás tomando para ti. Y y pues mucho más porque estás rodeada de gente que no sabes cómo va a reaccionar ante tus situaciones. Las dificultades, volvemos a hablar del tiempo, siempre pensamos que el estar en un grupo es invertirle tiempo, ¿no? Cuando realmente lo vemos de la otra forma es que lo estás ganando y lo estás ganando de una mucho mejor forma. ¿Cómo fue positivo? Pues fue muy grato. La verdad es de que he aprendido muchísimas cosas, he aprendido muchas cosas de mí que quizá no las tenía tan claras. Y pues lo más gratificante es que aún después del grupo llevamos muy buenas relaciones todavía algunas personas del grupo. Dentro de esos grupos hacíamos labores comunitarias como tareas dentro del grupo, y pues ahora después que ya se terminó, que ya no nos reunimos, seguimos reuniéndonos ya no como tarea, ya como decisiones personales, y seguimos haciendo cosas juntos. Entonces la verdad es de que eso es lo mejor de compartir con el grupo.
Thank you, Grace. Muchas gracias, Grace. I'll briefly put it in English. She was able to share within a group. There was a little bit of fear because sharing your thoughts within a group that you don't know and how they will react to your thoughts being shared.
Marisa,
yes.
Marisa, Jose was able to interpret all of that in our area, on our side.
Oh, for English?
Yes.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't hear that. Sorry, I didn't hear the interpreter say it into English. Thank you so much, Maris. I was trying to capture the thoughts in English. Thank you, Jose. You're awesome. Look at that. I started journaling my notes and I thought, ooh, how do I interpret this into English without capturing?
Thank you, Jose. He came over to the dark side for a little bit, so that's good.
Well, thank you for crossing the border into this side.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I want to share what Michael, thank you, Jose. And I do want to read what Michael Garcia shared in the chat. I enjoy working with the group, meeting other people, sharing and exchanging ideas. Meg said, I like the groups I'm involved with. I do see that they work best with a strong moderator leader. This helps members who may not be as outspoken in the group environment. Thank you all for sharing this.
And
So I'm
Cassie
gonna go
wants
ahead
to
and
share. Cassie
Cassie,
wanted to unmute herself.
yes, Cassie, could you share with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So it says here, I'm just going to go by your questions. It said, was it easy to work with in the group? Okay, I remember a opportunity that I had to lead a project that was like 3/4 of my grade when I was in my master's program. And in the group, sometimes groups are just put together. Sometimes you can select your group members, but this was a time that we couldn't select. It was like everybody jump in. So what I learned was once I just took opportunity to listen to all of the participants in the particular group that was assigned, to understand that some of them were housewives, some of them, there was a large group of age differences, some were professionals. It's just the gambit, whatever you can possibly think of, it was in our group. And so once I understood where everybody was coming from, their background, and so on and so forth, then I was able to engage based upon level of understanding, amount of experience. But in my mindset, I had to stay focused in saying that everybody has a voice, everybody's can bring something to the table, regardless of how much or how small. It's needed to contribute to the whole and for the success of the project. So with that understanding, I my difficulty was in the beginning to get everyone to understand, I mean, to participate and to understand from that standpoint how to better engage. And so after some struggles and so on and so forth, you can possibly imagine, we finally got on the same page. And so the bottom line was respect and honor one another. And so once we did that, I think that was the greatest challenge of my life, because I ended up having to lead the group, which it wasn't my intention, but I had to lead the group. And then bottom line, the project turned out to be very successful. And then we were able to make friends, become friends, and communicate after. So, but that was one of the hardest things that I had to really learn about group dynamics, is to how to properly engage in group dynamics, because I watched a lot, I listened a lot, and I took notes a lot. And then I had to pick and choose when I would enter in or when I would interrupt, because there was a lot of rhetoric going on in the beginning. So it worked out.
Thank you, Cassie. And I do have one more, Lenny Gatterson. She added in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and read her reflection. Hello, everyone. Lenny Gatterson, Kathy Binks Elementary. Working in a group is challenging. Oftentimes, there are different goals, different priorities, and other issues that arise. Having a great moderator helps to facilitate the group. Thank you. And
yeah, that's great. And Marisa,
yes,
I just wanted to share something real quick, if I may.
Yes.
Based on a couple of the comments that were live. And so, you know, one of the things we try to do in our workshops, and I think it's important when we're working with groups, that we set some agreements, right, to have a conversation. And usually one of the things that I always talk about is that, you know, if we stay engaged, sometimes we will experience some discomfort as we're working together in groups, because it's just a natural part. But if we allow each other to speak each other's truths, and at times, depending on what the issue is, we may have to expect and accept non-closure, meaning that we're probably going to be in different places at different times, and that's okay. as long as, like Cassie had said earlier, is if we respect each other, we listen with the intent to learn and suspend judgment, that we can continue to move forward as a group. And I think that's important. And that's something that we didn't put in our presentation today, but I wanted to hit that because that is important in any group that you work with. I know that when I work in making decisions as a governance team member, I always have to put that in the forefront of my mind. And so thank you for sharing that, because that just sparked an idea that we had forgot to mention about parent committees and the importance of that piece and understanding. So thank you, Marisa.
Thank you, Mars, for bringing that to the conversation as well. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts, for helping us mine the wisdom of the group. And just like Cassie mentioned and all of you mentioned, a group is really it works good when you have a facilitator that can make sure everyone's voice is at the table. So we know that not everybody shared, whether you have your notes or you thought, this is great reflection, but I'm just not going to share today. It is a representation of what our leadership groups look like. We have leadership groups that we will cover today. And within those groups, you see the outspoken leaders, you see the ones that are more shy, and they say, I want to be here because of the service, but I'm really not that outspoken, but I do want to work and provide my services to the community. And we have also leaders who do not engage in the groups, but their voices need to be represented. And so that's why we were intentional to write that question of, how do we make sure that when we are in the leadership group, we're representing everyone's voice? And those quiet voices bring that representation, because they may be the ones that, I don't know if I should say this, I don't want to hurt nobody's feelings, but I do feel strongly about this. And so making sure that we have a leader and a facilitator that helps everyone's voice chime in, and also sets those parameters and those I guess group agreements, right? How we're going to work, like Mark said, what are the group agreements that we're going to join in and agree upon? So we are going to gather today and we're going to have conversations about budgets, or the conversation may be about the climate in our school. So we're going to chime in and have our thoughts and try to get to a common place, but don't expect to have closure today, because that's an ongoing conversation. So it takes a leader and it takes some group agreements to bring that to the work and to move the work forward. So today we wanted to start with this kind of brainstorming conocimiento to mine your wisdom, and to also help us as we go through the presentation. We're going to talk about the different groups that are leadership groups in our districts and our schools. And some of those groups may have other different topics than other groups to discuss, but it does bring all the highlights that you shared. It sometimes is easy, sometimes it can get a little bit challenging. Some people are afraid of sharing their thoughts because how will others react? Are we all on the same page? Do we all have a common goal? And do we have the agreements to make sure that we cannot take this work personal? It really is about the students. So today we're going to join in conversation about the different leadership groups that help each district move the work forward and bring the student voice through the parent voice, or actually having students at that table. So thank you all for sharing the conocimiento, and I'm going to toss it now to Mark.
Thank you, Marisa. So today's work is going to revolve around some of our very basic parent committees. Sometimes districts will have other ad hoc committees or other things that they'll put together based on need. But today we're going to talk about some very basic, and what I mean by basic is the fundamental principles of the parent committees that most school districts have. So for example, almost every school district, almost every school will have what's called a school site council. So we're going to have a conversation about that. Some districts, not all, will have what's called a superintendent's advisory council. They might call it something different. They might call it a leadership council or a parent leadership council, but it kind of has some similar dynamics. English language advisory committees or councils, or district English learner advisory committee or councils. We're going to talk about those today. We're going to talk about what we call APACs or DAPACs, which is our African American parent advisory committees, our district African American advisory committees. We will talk a little bit about PTAs and PTOs and a little bit of the governance difference between a PTA and PTO, so people have an understanding, because some schools will choose to have a PTA, which is has oversight by state, and where PTOs will have no oversight. Usually the school or the district itself will have some oversight over the PTO, a little different governance piece. And then the community advisory committees, which are part of special education. So I just wanted to, preface that that'll be the parts that we'll focus on today. And then talking about the goals and objectives of each one of those committees. So Marissa, you can go to the next slide, please. So just a quick overview of what parent committees are. I want people to understand that they are advisory committees. A lot of times when our parents jump onto one of these advisory committees, they always feel, and I understand why, that their voice needs to be heard, which is understandable, but sometimes the decisions that are made based on their voice are not made. And so this could be a little bit frustrating because at the end of the day, it's advice that the parent committees is giving to the district, to the leadership team, to the governance team, either to create a policy, to spend dollars that are dedicated for kids. But it's important to understand that these committees are generally advisory committees, and not everyone's advice or reflections will always be put forth. And I think that's an important piece to understand. And that's why you have to expect and accept non-closure sometimes, because there's so many priorities that are there that sometimes not everyone's can be put there. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. A lot of the priorities are based on achievement data to provide input on how we can increase achievement, a lot of times for underserved students. When you think about the African American Parent Advisory Councils, a lot of the goal there is to decrease opportunity and achievement gaps for African American students. Our ELACs and DLACs, the goals there are to increase academic achievement for those that are not proficient in English. So we just want to make sure that people have that understanding that a lot of time data is looked at, and we have to make data decisions that are based on the best interests of kids. A lot of times we're talking about social emotional learning, school climate. How do we spend our Title I dollars? How do we move special education in a direction that's inclusive for all special ed students? A lot of times we're trying to increase issues around attendance or behavior or extracurricular activities. And so it's important to understand that these committees are giving information and reflections around that. The other piece is that we want to promote and encourage family and community engagement in our schools and our district. And that's an important piece. A lot of times we struggle a lot around how do we do that. So these committees are a tool to help promote and encourage community and family engagement. It also provides opportunities for fundraising. Our PTAs or PTOs, they do a lot of work to help support academic achievement around fundraising for kids. A lot of times you see PTAs fundraising for academic assistance or field trips or things that help students learn better. The other piece is the communication. Communication is key in any relationship. And so those parent communities, or parent committees, I should say, are really the liaison between the community and the school based on those themes that we're trying to talk about. So communication always is that key. And then really to identify the concerns of our students, our parents, and our community members in assisting to develop what we say solutions. When you sit on a committee, I'm just going to give a little bit of advice because this is where I come from. When there's a problem, if you have a solution to the problem, a lot of times those of us that are in administration or in leadership, it helps to have a perspective on what a solution might be. A lot of times what I find that people will say to me is, there's this problem, and I'll say, well, what do you suggest we should do? And the answer is, well, you're in the leadership position. You should be the one that knows how to change it. Well, that's not always the case. Sometimes problems are new. We have not had that experience. And so if you have a way to create a change or language in a policy that can help move something different, I always encourage people, give me that information because that helps me be able to give your voice to the solution that you're looking for. So I just wanted to throw that out there because a lot of times we forget that when there's a problem, you may have the solution and I may not have it if I'm on a governance team. So I just want to put that over there. So at this point, there is a natural break, Marisa. I do want to take our 25-minute Pomodoro break, or not a 25-minute break. We just worked for 25 minutes. I want to make sure we take our 5-minute Pomodoro break. So at this time, it is 9:37. I'm not really good at math, so I think it's 9:42 is 5 minutes, if I do it correctly. So we'll come back at 9:42. Is that okay with everybody? Marisa, we good?
Yes, it will be 43. So
All right.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Mars. Yes, it is
42.
Yes.
So I'm gonna pause the
Let's take
recording at
5
this
minutes.
time. All right, I'm gonna pause it and I'll be back. We'll be back in 5 minutes. All right, we're recording again, everybody. Thank you for coming back. And so Marisa, this next slide is yours.
Thank you, everyone. We hope that you do take that wellness break and you stretch. I hope you're able to hear the music. We put music just to inspire you to do a little bit of dance moves. Nobody's watching, just turn off your camera. And if you want to have us learn from your steps, you can turn on your camera. We encourage movement and wellness here in our workshop. So thank you, Mars. We are going to dive in a little bit deeper on what the conversation Mars started with, the different leadership groups and their goals. And so the first one that Mars talked about was school site council. And as you can see here, here's a visual that kind of gives you a representation of what a school site council would look like. You have the principal, you have teachers, you have other staff. It can be your front desk staff, parents, absolutely, community partners. And in middle and high school, we have students. I want to just take a little detour from our visual here and actually ask you participants here in our conversation, how many of you are school site council members? I'm actually looking through the screen. So give me a thumbs up if you're not sharing your screen, just like in the reactions. And if you are sharing your screen, I want to see your thumbs up. How many of you have or are currently school site council members? Thank you, Daniela. Good job. So we have a school site council member. Daniela, what's your role in the school site council? Let me see. I saw another thumbs up. Ana Gutierrez. So if you don't mind typing in the chat, what's your role in the school site? Oh, Aida.
Hi. Good morning. I'm the secretary. I do the note taking. The minutes.
That's a lot of work, Daniela. I've been secretary of the school site council. You work a lot.
Yes.
That's a role that I do not want. I know that's the one that I'm like, no, don't let me be that. Thank you. Who else raised their hand that you want to share your role? Let me see. I missed. Now they're hiding. Did you type it into the chat maybe? Mike, is there anything on the chat? I can't see the chat right
I'm checking. Ana Gutierrez already shared, I believe, the secretary, and then Aida Guerrero said other staff members. So because part of it is there's other staff, so that's Aida's role. And then you got
great. So
the music was great from Sir to MV. It doesn't give their full name, so just wanted to give you that compliment, Marisa.
Thank you. Happy to serve. And then Dorothy Grant, Chair for Dorothy Grant, voting member on Marian Summit. Great. So as you can see, we can see from our participants, from all you, our RPLA familia, a representation of this graph that you have here in front of you. So we have other staff, we have parents who are who can take the role of secretary, president, vice president, teachers, principals, students. So we're gonna look a little bit more. So what's a school site council? It really is a community that represents the school that comes together, right? So that community is invested in the best for the students and make sure that the school site council is doing what the school's goals are. So this community or this network of leaders that come together is represented by teachers, parents, administrators, community partners, and middle and high school, we have students because we need the student voice. The principal is absolutely vital to be in this leadership group because it really aligns with the goals that he needs to carry on. Now, does the principal need to be necessarily the president? It actually is encouraged to have someone else other than the principal be the president and facilitate the conversation and the meeting, because you want to have him engage on the conversation and not really having to lead the conversation. So there's the California Education Code 52852 that requires that school site council shall be established at each school that participates in Title I funding or LCFF, Supplementary Concentration Grant funding. So whether the school receives Title I funding, which is federal funds, or they receive, and all schools receive LCFF, Supplemental Concentration Grant funding, you do need to have a school site council. The SSC decides upon the focus of schools' academic instructional programs as and related to Title I or LCFF supplemental concentration funds. So what that means is we need to make sure that when we meet, we have conversations that align with our goals and how the budget is going to support those goals. So here's another list of who is part of the school site council. It is selected by peers. So for example, teachers need to run, and whoever is teacher, they run up against their peers. And then you have parents that run for membership and they run up against their peers. The vacancies are filled according to the bylaws. So in the school that I'm actually a school site council member, it's a 2-year. That's what our bylaw says. So after 2 years, you do need to have somebody else come in, stepping into that role. Representatives are principal, parents, community members, teachers, other staff. So front desk, it can be your front desk staff. It can be your assistants in the classroom, your new aides. It can be your, let me see, give me another example, Mars. Who am I missing an important role in our campuses? Our janitor, it could be.
We've had our custodial staff be part of it. Sometimes, they're very engaged. But any classified members, sometimes you have nutrition staff that's part of it as well. So anyone that's on the school staff is included in being a part. Whether they serve or not is a different, but they're all included in the opportunity.
Yes, and I've seen sometimes that we think of just as other staff, just the front desk staff, but the custodial staff knows the students a lot. They interact with them day in, day out. PE teachers, the nutrition staff, they interact with kids every day. So it's good to have their voice at the table because they bring that perspective of the culture within the school. And then other staff as well. And of course, if you're in the middle and high school, it's highly recommended to please have your students as part of the council. So what do we do when we're in the school site council? So the first thing is you revise, analyze, and modify the single plan. We call it SIPSA, but that plan, it's the plan for the year for the school. So you want to make sure that you bring that plan at the beginning of the year, make sure that it's in alignment and reflects the LCFF plan or the Local Control Funding Formula Plan, the LCAP plan. Because if it's not in alignment, then we know that we're not aligning our budgets to support that work. It consults with ELAC, and I know we only put here ELAC, but ELAC, APAC, and other committees that are there, the PTA, to make sure that other parent groups bring their voice and we take their voice in consideration into the plan that we're doing. It recommends the LCAP budget spending as part of the plan. So we definitely need to make sure that those recommendations are noted in our LCAP plan. It delegates or develops and approves the school safety plan in collaboration with the authorities that implement the law. So we usually review the safety plan and we make sure that it's current to the current cultural need, the safety needs of our community and our school. And it revises or amends school site council bylaws. So if perhaps the school site council says, we have a lot of turnaround and our families come in and go, they don't really stay 2 or 3 years. So maybe the bylaw says after 1 year, we want to make sure that there is a new school site council member, or you want to extend it a little bit longer. And annually reviews the student dress code and approves it and makes sure that it's in alignment as well. Any questions so far or any thoughts? I'm going to pause. Any thoughts in the chat? We love our school site council and council secretaries. Yes, we do. Michael Garcia sending shout out and love to our school site council members. So I'm going to pause a little bit and kind of diving into the SIPSA a little bit more. So what's the SIPSA? We often call it SIPSA, but I also advise to get away from the acronyms when we're talking with parents, because our parents learn just the acronym and they say SIPSA, but they don't know what that means or what that stands for. So it is a single plan for student achievement. And what that means is it's one plan that we have at the school that addresses all of our students, all of our different demographics or our needs. And it makes sure that it also aligns with the LCAP plan that we have at the district, because again, if we have that funding allocated from the district, it should really align as it moves to the school sites where students live. It is a mandate, the information of a school site council, in order to revise and update school site council plan and budget. And the purpose is to coordinate all the programs. It's to have one plan that addresses all of our programs. And so I'm gonna pause there, because often when we are doing or SIPSA, we're talking about one part of that is family engagement. And I've seen personally in my experience, just being a school site council parent, sometimes the work that we're doing, the workshops that we want to have parents attend to or bring to the school may not be listed there, or may be too specific that it doesn't allow room for something that comes up that we need to send parents to. So when we're doing the SIPSA, we need to make sure that parent engagement, we are detailed about it. And not only in the SIPSA, but that also those details, those trainings, for example, if you are going to be attending a specific conference or parent classes or parent workshops, that they are listed with funding allocated to it. And it also aligns to the LCAP, and it's also reflected there. Because when we don't, the work may be happening, but we're not really jotting it down. And often in our office, when we're seeing LCAP, we're saying, oh, such district is doing so much work than this. There's more that they're doing, but it's not reflective in the LCAP, or maybe even in the SIPSA. So I just wanted to pause and share that, because often we're doing a lot more work than we're actually describing in our SIPSAs or in our LCAP. And also another thing that the single plan for student achievement does is align content of single plan with school goals. So the school goals should be really reflected within the plan. When we're looking at the expenses, we want to make sure that the expenses support the decisions of the school plan as approved by the school site council. They comply with the federal laws and state laws, and they also support student academic achievement goals. So when we're looking at the budget expenses, even when we're talking about family engagement, and I pause again for family engagement because this is our conversation, how do we support student achievement and student growth through the engagement of the families? We want to make sure that the goals also reflect what we're doing with families to support that student growth, whether it is academic, social emotional, behavioral support, goals that we have for students. How are we bringing families as part of that conversation? And if we're doing this plan for families, how are we allocating funds to support that engagement of the families, the leadership development that we have with the families and the communities? And if we don't see the connection between the student growth, the achievement growth that we want to see in the students with the plans that we have with families, then we need to make sure that maybe we're missing the connection and we need to be more specific, or we need to make sure that those efforts align. And the reason why is because, again, when budget comes, you want to make sure that you invest in the efforts that really align with supporting students. And when our board members, and Mars is here, so he can testify to this, when board members meet and they say, well, what's this? This is great, but how does this support our students? If the connection is not there, it can be something that can not be replicated the next year. So when we're doing family engagement and as school site council members, let's make sure that we're specific on writing why we're doing this efforts for families to align to student achievement. And in all efforts that we do, there needs to be a correlation between that effort and the student growth and the student goals that we have. I hope that makes sense. The next slide that we have here is, as you know, and I think Danielia was here and she said that she is the secretary for her school site council. So she knows how wonderful this note-taking process is and how much time it takes. And I put these two slides here, these two pictures, because I'm a colorful, artistic note taker, which is why I don't like the role of secretary in the school site council, because I need to not do that. I cannot do my inspiring, my bubbles, and my decorating note taking that I love to do personally. I need to stay more to the Robert Rules of Order note taking to make sure that it's clear and there's a history of what took place. Because if it's not written, it didn't happen. And so we need to make sure that the notes are taken in a way that anyone can go and say, what did we say back in March when we met? Because now we have our meeting in May and we need to make sure it's followed through. Or that, what was the intent of this when we met in our first meeting back in September? And we look back, and if the notes are not clear in detail, it really doesn't provide a historical journey that the school site council has taken, their efforts really. So the minutes and agendas need to be taken seriously. So we need to have agendas, signing sheets, pamphlets that that record everything that was shared during that meeting. So pamphlets, documents that really reflect the conversation of that day. It should be filed in a safe place. So as much as my car, I want to say it's safe, it shouldn't be stored in my car. It should really be stored in the school's file. So I know the secretary has a lot of responsibilities to type the notes and make sure that it's sent back to the school and it's stored in the school, and all the files that were shared, the folders, the pamphlets are also put in that folder. The minutes from the previous meeting need to be approved at the following meeting. So if each time we meet, the first thing we do is review those minutes and make sure that everything we remember that was shared is captured. And it's just yeah, it's fair enough, but is it captured enough to where any parent can say, I would like to see the minutes from the last meeting that you had? Is it captured in a way that any parent, any community partner, or any staff from the district that comes in and wants to read those minutes can really see the details of the conversation? And it should be able to be reviewed as necessary by parents. So it is a document that any parent can ask, can I see the minutes from the last school site council meeting? It is not a private document. It is a public document. Anyone can request it. And a lot of our schools actually post them in their website as, you know, the last minutes from our school site council meetings. So that's a great practice because you're really having that transparency within your school culture. I'm going to now move, I'm going to pause for a second and just ask any thoughts or any questions that we have on school site council so far. Okay, I'm looking at the chat and I don't see any thoughts or questions. So I'm going to now move on to our next leadership group. And I love this one. I'm not currently an ELAC parent. I haven't had the opportunity to be an ELAC parent member or a DLAC parent because my students, my kids, Eliana and Noah, are both not English learners. We did multilingual racing in our house. So when they took the CELT test, both of them passed it as initial fluent speakers. But I do have this work close to my heart because I am an English learner, and you can hear the accent on me. I often go to my brain. I'm like, am I saying it right? Is this grammatically correct? I am an English learner. I came at the age of 11. And so I know that I'm standing on the shoulders of those that fought for English learners to receive the best education they could have. And I actually remember that when I was in elementary and middle and high school, we did not have an ELAC committee. And I do remember that in middle and elementary, we didn't have enough English learners. But by the time I was in 11th grade, there were enough English learners that we could have had an ELAC. So I say that because back in the days, this is probably in the late 80s, early 90s, it wasn't, the information wasn't out there as much as it is now. But now we know that there are some requirements, and it is important because these are some of the students that are learning and they're receiving the support that at times we may or we may not understand because we may not have that experience. So having the ELAC committee come together is so crucial because families know their students and they know their journey and they know their needs. So we need to understand what that need is. It's really different if we're speaking about a community where most of the English learners are Spanish speakers versus, I apologize, let me drink a little bit of water. Versus a community where most of our English learners speakers are Mandarin speakers or Tagalog. It is a different need. So we need to make sure that when we have English learners at the school, at the district, we have those committees represented of the families of these students, because that's how we can understand what the need is and how can we bring those supports to the table. So the ELAC is a group of parents that represent the student population and the diverse language needs at our school. The ELAC learns more about the programs offered to their children. So as a parent of an English learner sitting in the ELAC, they understand the supports more closely, and they understand the plan the school is executing to support the learning their students are doing in the school. The ELAC participates in the school's needs assessment of students, parents, and teachers. So it's really important because they give that voice. And again, if we have a diverse ELAC population or EL population, we want to make sure that our ELAC is representing that diversity. It's not only representing one group. It provides the input in the most effective ways to support full participation of English learners in all school activities. So as parents, they advocate for, can EL students attend this event? Can EL students have something to participate in other activities? So they do advocate a lot for the needs of English learners. ELAC also provides input on the most effective ways to ensure regular school attendance. And it's really important to understand that culture. If our EL population is migrant ed, we may have a different insight from families as to why the attendance is not regular from their students. When we don't have as many students who are mobile, it may be other things. It may be that, culturally, I know in our Latino cultures, we see a lot of our families that say, well, Mexico is just right here in the border, and El Salvador is just like a few hours more drive. We're going to go to visit our families during Christmas and holiday, and we may stay, a week extra or two and not tell the school. So, but when we understand our families and we're close to them, we help them learn that it is our expectation to make sure that they let us know if their students are going to be out 1 more week or 2 more weeks because of travel. So it really helps us with school attendance, and they understand our need to have a positive school attendance. And they may say, you know what, we were going to take 2 weeks, but no, I think we're going to come back right before school starts. So it does bring that partnership that benefits our students and our schools. Our ELAC, it says, sorry, I can't see the screen right now. Requirements for the establishment of an ELAC committee. So we do have some requirements, and I mentioned this when I was in high school. We had, by the time I got to 10th grade, we actually had about probably 30 students in our school, and there was no ELAC. So I know that this was like in the late 90s. And there are some requirements for an ELAC committee. So an ELAC committee is recommended for each school that has 21 or more students who are English learners. Not at the district, but at the school. If you have 21 students or more at the school, you do need to have an ELAC. It provides significant advice and input regarding the services and programs for English learners. And there is some ed code and codes that reflect that. So we know that Title III provides funding. And if those fundings are not reflecting on the support that our programs are doing, then we can lose those fundings if we don't have an ELAC that shows they're advocating and they're reviewing these plans and they're approving these plans. It fulfills the need for supervision of the LCAP. Functions of an English Learner Advisory Committee or an ELAC. It advises the principal and staff on school programs effectiveness. So we do need to meet with them as a principal, vice principal. You need to share what the programs are, and they need to say how they're feeling their students are receptive to those programs. Do we need more for English learning, or are those programs just sufficient enough? It advises the school site council on single plan for student achievement, SIPSA. And at times what I've seen is if there's not a high number of ELAC members in the committee, and the committee gives the right to the school site council, you can actually have a school site council that represents the voice of an ELAC. It's not a recommended practice, but it does happen in some of our communities where we have small representation of English learners and ELAC parent committees. The ELAC also reviews the school annual language census, the R30, how many students of diverse languages are at our school. It conducts a site English learners needs assessment, and it advises school on issues with state and federal funding programs. And it informs families of the importance of regular school attendance. So the ELAC is that partner that at our school helps us work with other families of English learners and shares with them the importance of regular school attendance. Here are the roles. So we have a president, vice president, secretary, and DLAC representative. I'm going to pause also and ask, are any of you here ELAC or DLAC members. I'm gonna now browse through the screen. Let me see if there's any thumbs up. Do we have any ELAC or DLAC members here? Don't see anybody. Okay, so the roles are very. Oh, Jocelyn Castro is. Jocelyn's hand is up. Thank you, Jocelyn, for serving in a DLAC or ELAC. So here are the roles. The president conducts the meeting, signs all the forms of correspondence and communication. It assumes all responsibilities according to the bylaws. The vice president assists the president with all issues. It conducts the meetings in the absence of the president. It represents the president in any assignment and assumes all other responsibilities and duties as assigned. Secretary, again, like Daniela, takes minutes and develops a finalized minute for the meeting that took place. Sends to all members of the ELAC and DLAC. And all agendas are have to be posted 72 hours prior to the meeting to advise parents that there is a meeting taking place. DLAC representative attends all DLAC meetings and serves as liaison to the committees. It advises the committee regarding the parliamentary procedures and informs DLAC of the ongoing ELAC meetings. So each role is really important because it really connects other families who are not in this committee and they're not able to participate. Another thing before I transition to Mark, the ELAC committee, again, it's really important because it brings the voice of the students that are the neediest at times in our school sites. We have different diversity of students. We have special education, we have English learners, we have students that are high achievers, and we need that voice. ELAC just brings one perspective. So it's really just one of the groups that we need to bring the culture, the needs that our families have. And I cannot emphasize this enough that if we have a diverse English learners population, we need to outreach to the families to have a well-diverse ELAC committee. So all of the needs can be met. And again, thank you all for having your leadership role here and your leadership hat as you're here attending the RPLA, but you're also part of school site councils and ELAC. It really is your knowledge to the table. It's really appreciated. So I'm gonna now transition to March because we are done with the ELAC and DLAC phase. Mark, and I think I have my clock that says 25 minutes have passed.
Yeah, you're right. So I was going to give him a break, but before I do that, I just wanted to say, Ms. Gasper from Dorothy Grant had a question on ELAC. Are the meetings translated into English for English only to attend and see and hear concerns of English learner issues? And I will say that I would say 99% of all schools do a great job of making sure that things are interpreted or translated back into English. So those families that are part of leadership committees and other roles like school site council will be able to hear the concerns of our ELAC and DLAC members. Sometimes it may be a little bit challenging on time frame, I could say. Some schools may take a little bit longer to translate some of the documents, but at the end of the day, they're all supposed to be translated so that they are in the predominant language of English and Spanish in those areas. In some school districts, because Mandarin or other languages may be the predominant language, they are also translated in that language as well. So I just wanted to give that insight. And then Gris is also part of an ELAC or DLAC in her district. So we are going to take a 5-minute break.
Mark, real quick before we break, I do want to highlight Chino Unified School District. So if any of you are interested in connecting with our Chino Unified School District community and partners, I have attended their DLAC and ELAC meetings, and I was really impressed that as they did their ELAC, you have a Spanish interpreter, so somebody like Jose interpreting for Spanish speakers, and then somebody in Mandarin interpreting. So we had 2 interpreters simultaneously as the meeting was carried on in English. So it was trilingual, and it was live. They actually now do the same practice, but in Zoom. And so if you want to connect with them, we'll be happy to share the information from our Chino Unified School District partners. And what I was really impressed too is that they have the interpretation simultaneously, they translate the documents, and they follow up with questions. So they have the interpreters as liaisons that they follow up with parents who have questions in their individual language. So it's a great practice to learn from. So we'll be happy to share that information if you email us and want to learn more about their practice or even their resources.
All right. Well, it's 10:13, ladies and gentlemen. All right, everybody. Well, welcome back. Thanks again for hanging with us. And the next segment of today's presentation, I'm going to talk about a committee that has been near and dear to my heart because I was able to actually organize an African American Parent Advisory Council from the ground up when I worked in San Bernardino City Unified many, many years ago. And I know in our current capacity at Fontana, Michael Garcia, who's on the call with us today, is also one of the main organizers in our district as he leads our family and community engagement efforts. And then many of you who are on the call, whether you're community aid or you work in our family community engagement work, have supported this work. So thank you so much. And so it's important to know that not every district, not every school has African American Parent Advisory Council. And our goal is that this work does spread around our county. It has grown in different districts. I know Riverside Unified out in the Riverside area, Riverside County area is very strong. Moreno Valley Unified, I know, has had work in this. My friend from Valverde out in Valverde Unified School District, out in Paris as well. We're starting to see this become more of a norm than just an anomaly. But the goal here in our councils for African American are to really engage our African American parents in the decision-making process to get a perspective on what would help close the opportunity and achievement gaps for our African American students. This has been met in some ways with some controversies. I will be very honest and open with you on this because not all people believe that we should be separating thoughts or perspectives. And it's not about separating, it's really to have courageous conversations around issues of things like race and ethnicity and things that really sometimes will be a part of our educational system, biases and things of that nature that we just don't really see right away until we get into the deep roots of the root cause of the work. And then we begin to have some better understanding. So I just want people to understand that when we've created African American Parent Advisory Councils, there's always been some sort of tension, some conflict sometimes, and it's natural in the work. So many of us hate conflict, but it does happen at times, and it's getting better. But sometimes we are met with some issues. So I just want to throw that out there so that people don't think, well, why are we doing this? What's the issue? There are many things, but the goal again is to decrease the opportunity gaps for our African American students. And so these groups also make recommendations to the school site council. Those that have district African American Parent Advisory Councils also make recommendations sometimes to the superintendent's advisory council, because in many districts, all committees, whether it's ELAC, the PTAs, PTOs, school site councils will all blend into one council in many ways. I know in Fontana, that's always been the goal with the superintendent's advisory council, is to bring all the committees together so that there's a dialogue amongst all the committees, commonalities, conversations that then can help support the superintendent in his or her work, depending on what district we're in, and ultimately guide the Board of Education to sometimes create policy or at least budget priorities for the needs of students around academic needs. Earlier, Michael put something in the comment, which I know I had talked about, but I really want to reiterate it again because Michael did put it in the chat, and thank you for putting that, is that the decisions are data-driven decisions, right? They're not made on emotion. They're not made on, you know what, I think this is a great idea. I mean, not saying that we can't do that, but many times we got to look at the data. What does it tell us? What do we need to improve on? Because many of our districts now are what we call continuous improvement processes, meaning that we try to do things in the best interest of students. We try to see where those improvements are made in, and if they're not made, why, and try to create ways to improve in those areas. So I think it's important to know that and understand that. Marissa, can you go to the next slide, please? So our basic structures of our APACs, again, they're very similar to our ELAC. So many times when we created this, the ideas behind the governance piece, the participation of individuals are very similar to what I say our ELACs and DLACs are put together on. So we have the administrators are part of it, our teachers, our parents and families, we have student voice, and many community stakeholders. I think the other myth that we need to debunk here in African American Parent Advisory Councils, and it's not just for African American families. Okay, I think that's important. Even though the focus is on African American achievement, we need all individuals that work with our African American students at the table to have discussion about this. Because at the end of the day, when our African American students go back in the classroom, the teacher may not be African American. It might be Latino, it might be white, it might be Asian, it might be whatever background that person is from. And so, but we need those individuals at the table to be able to give us data, give us information, give us perspective, because our students are navigating a myriad of places on our school systems. So I just want to make sure that's clear. Next slide, please. So now the next topic. So any questions on our APAC? I just want to, now we're going into the Superintendent's Advisory Council. So any questions on APAC from anybody out there? You can raise your hand. You can also put it in the chat. So thank you for that. I'm scrolling through. I don't see any hands raised.
No, there are no questions, Mike.
All right. Hopefully I hit that point home. All right, Superintendent's Advisory Council. So these committees are put together as a representative body of a variety of stakeholders who really are trying to advise your local superintendent. This is another way that the superintendent is available to his or her constituency. Many times we find that parents' biggest complaint is that, you know what, I never get to see my superintendent. I never get to talk to him or her. And so this provides a venue of opportunity for parents to be able to engage with your superintendent, to be able to have a relationship, first of all, because I think that's the biggest piece. And then after that, be able to also give advice, recommendations, and just be heard. Many times, the body that is put together in a SAC, as we call it, they are also helping the school board and maybe possibly creating policy in their governance team. So I think it's important to understand that this is a high level group of a committee. Again, I did say that most districts will bring all their subcommittees, ELACs, DLACs, school site councils, PTAs, PTO, all those committees that we talked about earlier into this umbrella of the Superintendent's Advisory Council, so that all the voices are heard in one place. So that's how most structures are for your your Superintendent's Advisory Committee. Any questions on this? I don't want to belabor this. Not all districts have them, but I just want to make sure that you have a basic understanding of what that is. And again, I'll scroll through the 3 pages to see if anyone's raised their hand. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will address those questions for you. And even if you have to write them in Spanish, we will make sure that they are translated and put on. All right, next slide, please. So the next segment is the Community Advisory Committee. Community Advisory Committees are also by mandate under state of California to have a parent body, a community body that helps move the work of special education. Most districts, larger districts, have what's called a SELPA, which is a Special Education Local Plan Area. Smaller districts, I give you some examples like Cucamonga, Central School District, Altaloma, have the services provided by the County Office of Education. If you're in our region here, you've probably heard of our West End SELPA. Those districts will have support services from the West End SELPA. But larger districts like Fontana, San Bernardino City Unified, Redlands Unified, the larger districts have what they call their own SELPAs. And so they'll have a Community Advisory Committee. And again, the purpose of the CAC is really to champion effective special education programs and services for our special education students. And they also help advise your local boards of education on priorities in their SELPAs. So that's the body. I also want you to understand that many parents will also advocate themselves on the side of a CAC, and I think that happens in every committee. They will come during public comment at school boards and they will have their voices heard there. I know that in the community that I serve, we do have a strong contingency of parents that will come to us and give us their thoughts and ideologies on what needs to change in our local SELPAs. But the CAC is really that huge body that comes together and creates that opportunity of advice. Any questions on what a CAC is? All right, thank you. And next slide, please. So our last area of focus, hopefully today, that allows you to understand a little bit better is our PTA and PTO organizations. And PTAs are really based on local schools, and then there will be a larger council. So I'm going to give you the example of Fontana. So most schools in Fontana Unified, I would probably say about 85% of our schools in Fontana. And Michael, if I'm wrong in that statistic, because it may have changed, but I know there was a time where I was helping support the PTA. There was about 85% of our schools in Fontana had PTAs, and they reported to the larger council, which is the Fontana Council. Is that correct, Michael? I want to make sure I have my statistics right, because I don't want to put out, I see a thumbs up. Thank you, Michael. I want to make sure that that's accurate. So PTAs normally are helping to help improve academic achievements for students in their schools. They work together with teachers, they volunteer in classrooms, they raise money, but the goal is always to have what's called improvement efforts. You'll have a president, a vice president, a secretary, treasurer. I can tell you from experience, I supported as a treasurer for several years on my local elementary school PTA. I was the only male. That's the other thing when you think about some of these committees are predominantly, usually our mothers are involved in these organizations. It's always encourage our dads to get involved. And so those of you that do work, make sure you encourage those of us that are fathers or father figures in these committees, because it also brings a different perspective. I was able to bring a different perspective as a treasurer. I always remember that when my chair would address the group, she would say, "So ladies, what do you think?" I'd go, "Hello. I'm here." "Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen." "Yeah, well, okay, thank you." But the goal is always to begin to improve the outcomes of our students. Now, PTOs are very similar to PTAs. Remember, PTAs have a state oversight and a national oversight. PTOs are a little different, even though the goals are the same, their organizational structure is a little different. They don't report to a state PTA organization or a national organization. They're very local. There are pros and cons to having a PTA and PTO. With PTA, one of the pros is that you get support at the state level. You get support at the local level, like through your council. You get support at the national level. There are dues that you pay to those organizations. When you have a PTO, those dues usually stay in your school, and so people have a hard time, paying those extra dollars, particularly schools that are lower funded and may not have the dollars to help support those kind of things. But at the end of the day, it's really how the school wants to organize itself. I don't want to say that one is better than the other. There are always pros and cons. I could just tell you from experience, I was a part of PTA, but I also helped support PTOs in another district that I worked in, because the dollars that they were able to fundraise stayed locally versus some of those dollars going into the local council, the state council, or the national council. Okay, so that's that part of it. And next slide is, please, Marissa. And again, the purpose, I just talked about that, is really to advocate, to raise the standards of home life, to bring closer relationships from home to school, and then develop educators and the general public in united efforts to secure that all children have advantages in the physical, mental, social, and spiritual education of themselves. And then there's a link that we've provided there for you, that if you want any additional information on PTA and PTOs. So at this point, we're at a point where we're at questions, comments. We hope that Marissa and I have really given you a strong overview of those councils. This is a good time to really have this, two-way dialogue, to ask us any questions you may have around the councils. If they're specific, I'm going to say this, if your question is specific to an individual need, Marissa and I will stay on the call to be able to do that. But if your question is more general for individuals on this platform today, please make that question known right now. If you have an individual question, that's maybe particular to your school or your a unique situation, I will stay, Marissa will stay, we can answer those after the session is done. Is that fair for everybody? Because I don't want to bog down an individual question for the general audience. So hope that makes sense.
I do have a question for our audience, actually.
Yeah.
So can I pop my question? So my question is for all of us here. I'm intrigued to hear from Fontana and from Yucaipa. How have your leadership groups, your school site council, your ELAC, your APAC, your DAPAC, DLAC, PTA, PTO, how have they either improved or their attendance improved, or how have they changed since before COVID and now? How do you see those leadership groups moving through this time with distance learning and, you know, the fact that we have changed our meetings from in-person to a Zoom or Teams approach? How has that impacted your participation in this leadership groups? And you can either put them in the chat, or if you want to unmute and share with us. I'm just intrigued and I want to learn from you on how is that going.
Great question.
I'm not sure if anybody would like to share. I know it takes time to put something in the chat, so I'll give some thinking time. And again, my question is just, how is it going with distance learning, distance meeting in our school site councils? And Daniela, you raised your hand. Can you unmute and share with us, Daniela, and then Jocelyn Castro as well?
And then
Yes.
Michael raised his hand too.
So from my experience, well, at least I've noticed that it's a positive and a negative. The positive is that we're actually looking at different times where the parents are available. So we're able to be a little bit more flexible because we're actually online. So we've been able to do like afternoon meetings rather than morning meetings. Now, the attendance piece has been a struggle because I think that a lot of our families are not technology savvy. So it's very important for us to teach them that first before we start these meetings, because I've already learned that a lot of our families that were very engaged last year are not engaged this year because it's hard for them to get on the computers or to get on the phone, even with Teams, because we use Teams at the district. So for them, is if they see like a little bit of a glitch or a struggle getting on, they just don't get on. So I've had to walk a lot of them through those things. But once we get through that, I've noticed that it's easier for us to have our meetings at certain different times. So it's a little bit more flexible in a sense.
Thank you, Daniela. And you're in Fontana, right?
I'm Almeria Middle School in Fontana District, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Jocelyn, Michael, and then Meg.
Jocelyn, are
Hi,
you there?
Jocelyn.
She had her hand raised, but
It is, and it looked like she was talking, but we'll come back to Jocelyn. Michael, do you want to share something? We'll come back to you, Jocelyn.
So yes, hello everybody. So I've been working close with my team, my FACE team, and like Danielia said, I've heard both positive and negative. The positive is that we're having more parents participate. I've heard from some sites, especially when they've had coffees and some of their ELAC and SSC meetings, they've had over 100 participants, which is unheard of, you know, in a normal setting. So that's one plus. And then the time, scheduling the times, we know that especially in our district, our community, there's some challenges when it comes to access with technology. So we try to encourage parents to utilize the student laptop to engage in meetings that are taking place both at the site and at the district level. And so, for example, our department, we offer the parent university, and normally we offer a morning and an evening session. This year we're doing strictly an evening session, just to allow parents the opportunity to, once their students have disconnected, they're able to either log on together or utilize the student laptop to participate in the parent university or workshop that's being offered. One of the things that I wanted to share. So previously coming to the district, I was a site principal. And what I would do at my school site council, just an idea, just throwing it out there, because oftentimes what would happen, I'd have members on school site council, and they would share, well, what's ELAC doing, and what's PTA doing, and what's, and so what I did is I set some time aside at the school site meeting, and I actually invited a parent representative, and they gave a short report. And if they weren't able to attend, they just provided a brief report, a paragraph of what was taking place, or what activity or what program is going to happen that month or in the future. And that helped a lot too as well. And especially when it comes to decision making and, setting funds aside for parent engagement, for ELAC, for GATE and so forth. Very important to make sure that you have a representative, a voice at the table, especially when it comes time to making decisions. Even though it's not required, I just encourage those representatives to come in and participate at the monthly school site council meeting. So just throwing that idea out there, and that really alleviated a lot of the questioning because it is hard. And being a parent representative, you can attend all meetings. So if you have at least a brief report or someone to share out, that'll catch everybody up to speed and hopefully help you making choices and decisions for your school site.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for sharing that. And Jocelyn, we read your comment. I know you're having some technical difficulties. You want to try to unmute again, or if not, you can type up in the chat your comment. It looks like you're still unmuted. So I'm gonna go to Meg, and then we'll come back to Jocelyn, or you can type your comment, Jocelyn. Thank you, Meg.
Yeah, I just wanted to express, I've been a long time on different site councils in the district. And one of the good things about doing the meetings the way we've been doing them is I noticed they don't run over. It's easier to keep everything timed appropriately, keep everything on task the way it should be. But on the downside, I have seen you just don't have that personal involvement with the other members of the group the way you do when you're sitting around a table and having that kind of a business casual type of conversation about whatever the issues or concerns you're addressing are. So that's kind of the good part, and what I find to be the challenging part of the meetings being all online at this time.
Yeah, how do we build that relationship, right? So Jocelyn is having some technical difficulties, but I'm gonna share what I can't pronounce that. Siku said, attendance has improved. We schedule meeting after school through Teams. Parents have been getting better at joining. And also Ana Rocha said, I think it has been challenging in the technology aspect as far as parents navigating through doing meetings online, connecting, etc. The time options have been a positive result as more parents are able to log on. With that said, I do notice it is the same parents engaging and participating could be due to only those few able to navigate virtually. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I think Marcia and I are just, we always like to keep the work relevant, and so we want to learn from the experts in the field. So experts in the field are parents and community trying to navigate. We need to learn what the challenges are so we can help them. And also you and the school sites and district, because we want to make sure what efforts you're doing to improve the relationship building with families, the engagement with them, and the community partners, but also the challenges that we may be able to also help to keep the work relevant. So thank you for teaching me and Mars and Alma about the work that you're doing. We really give hats to you because you're doing the work, and we want to make sure that we keep our work relevant to your needs. So thank you.
And Margarita had said they had less number of parents participate in their first DLAC meeting, but their second one's coming up. She hopes to get more participation. And then Diana Gutierrez said it was a hard transition at first for online meetings, but as parents are adapting, now ELAC meetings have had better attendance and even in-person meetings before the pandemic. So technology has been helpful and useful. And I've been hearing that. depending on what's going on. I remember when we were doing our statewide work, Oxnard, if you remember, Marissa talked about how their improvement in attendance has happened through technology. So I think when we go back to some sort of in-person things one day, we'll probably be really good now at doing some in-person things since we've been used to that. And then now that we've had this normal of technology, doing both, and I think that may help increase the engagement of the disengaged, because I always talk to districts about how do we engage the disengaged. And so these tools that we've learned how to use the last 10 and a half months, I think are going to help us for the future. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely. We're going to have a hybrid model in person and Zoom. Well, thank you all. Thank you. It's been an honor for me to be learning from you and sharing with you. And I look forward to having you join our next meeting. And I know our team is just really honored to serve each one of you.
Yeah, so without further ado, just to let you know, our next RPLA session is on a topic that's really near and dear to me, and it's going to be on board governance, and that's going to be on the January 26th date, which is in 2 weeks. We have some special guests that'll be on a panel from other districts that are board members that are going to give you a perspective. Yours truly will be here, so those of you that are in Fontana will be able to hear a perspective from me from the Fontana side. But we also will have Jesus Holguin, who's a Moreno Valley Unified School District trustee, Gwen Rogers, who is a trustee over in San Bernardino City. We'll have an opportunity to dialogue with them. They'll give you a perspective. Jesus has been on the board in Moreno Valley for over 26 years. So you're going to hear a perspective from an individual who has served a long, long time. Gwen, I think, is on her second term in San Bernardino City. And I'm probably the rookie of the group, which I'm on my third year now here in Fontana. And so I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly trying to understand governance in a school district. And now that we have 2 new board members, is really trying to move that along. And so it'll be fun. And so hopefully we'll see you on that date. And if you have any questions, I would say between now and the next session, write them down, have them ready, because we want to really have a interactive dialogue. We'll have a presentation format at the first part of it, and then the second will be kind of a panel discussion on, asking questions and getting a perspective. So hopefully that helps. Meg, I see you have your hand raised. You have a question for us? No, it's just there from before? Okay. All right. Well, then if there are no other questions, Marissa, any closing thoughts or?
Just thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your service. As parents, community, and staff, I'm just honored to be here. And I'm excited that we get to see each other every other week now. So thank you for joining us in the RPLA.
Yeah. And you know what, before I do leave, I want to honor Jocelyn. She did try to talk, and she did put something in the chat. So she is having technical difficulties. She's the bilingual aide in North Tamarind. And she's noticed that generally speaking, attendance has decreased for these meetings, ELAC, for example, because our parents are not as tech savvy. And I think that was mentioned earlier. The tech side of this whole distance learning seems to really intimidate them. And this is discourages them from trying to log in. So just wanted to put her perspective out there. And Michael, thank you. We are recording this meeting, so it will be available. We'll have it on a YouTube link later and make it available for all to look at. And again, thank you, everybody. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve you today. We look forward to seeing you all in a couple weeks. And one last thing, sorry, Jose, thank you for your work. We have Jose and Jocelyn, I believe it was, or Jacqueline, who interpreted for us. I didn't jump on the other side much because I was here presenting, but I know that Jose and I'm sure Jacqueline, who is a team member, did a tremendous job. So I want to thank them for that. And we'll see them in a couple of weeks as well. Muchísimas gracias a todos. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Feliz Año Nuevo. Happy New Year.
That's right. That's right.